G'day guys, you're back with MiracleMAX. So how's it going? Today, first on the list, we have a Subaru Forester 2003, and yes, it's got the good old dollar sign stuck on the dash, the check engine light. According to law, the check engine light must come on if there's an emission fault. The manufacturer can decide if it needs to come on any other fault, but for the emissions, it must come on. So what's the problem? Let's have a look and check it out. So before this was brought into me, a fair amount of work has been done by a previous mechanic. He's scanned it, and as you can see there, the check engine light has come on and it's an O2 sensor fault. So it was recommended to the customer that the O2 sensors should be replaced. Of course that's what you do, isn't it? As soon as you see a code, you replace the part. No, you don't. You test, you diagnose, then you replace what's necessary. So let's see what the scan tool says and what information we can get from that. I've also asked the customer to fill in a customer diagnostic checklist. The thing is that they sit down and they have a look and tell me exactly the information that is needed to be supplied so that I can diagnose correctly. There's also a section down here for their name and signature, etc., so that they can say that this is what they've stated to me at the time of it being brought in. I've also been able to list a few other things. I'll just cover his name, etc. Both the pre and post O2 sensors have been replaced. It was advised by the previous mechanic. First of all, this guy has just bought the car. The previous owner did the front O2 sensor after being advised by the mechanic. It didn't put out the old dollar sign light, and so this customer has gone ahead and replaced the post O2 sensor, still with the check engine light on. So instead of guessing and throwing parts at this vehicle, let's diagnose, let's find out what the fault is. This thing's done 252,268 kilometres. That's a fair few Ks, isn't it? As you can see, that dollar sign is stuck on the dash there. The check engine light is on. It ain't going nowhere. She's staying for sure. So let's figure out what it is. Let's have a look at the G-scan, see what that tells us. This doesn't have a vehicle specific area, but it goes in through the 16-pin connector, which is fine. I'm going to go to a system search because I want to capture anything that might be related to the fault that we have. So we'll go through that. Whoops, we'll go there and we'll hit enter. And we have 18 ECUs to go through, so it may take a little time. While we're waiting for the rest of the scan to go through, I thought I'd show you a little bit of research that I've done on the subject. Now I can't remember if exactly that is the code, but it's very, very close. As you can see, it says there, one of the common mistakes when diagnosing these particular fault codes is do not immediately replace the heated oxygen sensor before checking all related wiring at the connector closely. The mechanic should ensure that there is 12 volts to the sensor and the ground is good. Also check both sides of the connector wiring to ensure the connector is good. Typical, isn't it? You know, you see something come up as a code with the word oxygen sensor on it, so you throw it away. That's not what you do. That's throwing parts at something. That's ridiculous. It just tells you the area that you have to go into, and in a lot of cases it'll actually give you the direction to go into, whether it's wiring, voltage high, voltage low, circuit, whether it's a performance issue. All those sort of things are generally listed within that code. I think the G-scan's now finished its scan, so let's have a look at what the codes are. Well, is my face red? I think so. You know what I forgot? I forgot to turn on the ignition. What an idiot. Okay, we've all done it. Come on, admit it. The ignition's now on. We'll go through and scan it again. Okie dokie. So we've got it up and running. Good one, Max. So you can see engine has two fault codes. Let's see what they are. Okay, we've got a, yeah, I was right, a P0032 and a P0037. Now, they're listed as history codes, but they're also current codes, guys, because that check engine light won't go out. If we have a look, notice what it says. The control circuit is high, bank 1 sensor 1, and the heater control circuit is low, bank 1 sensor 2. So both sensors are listed as faulty. It hasn't done a drive cycle at the moment, so that's probably why it's come up as a history code. But fortunately it's only in the engine side of things. There's no other faults present, which is good. Now as a heated circuit, that should come up as a current fault, I believe. Alright, there we go. Excellent. It's come up as present codes, as you can see. So both of those, what's that? Control circuit high, bank 1 sensor 1, it's present, and it's also listed as a history, of course. And the control circuit low. What should we do next? Well, let's go into live data. And what should we see? Well, that's the question, isn't it? Let's select some things, I reckon. We'll get our little pin out the side, a little pokey thing. Make sure that we get all the information we want. Let's graph those bad boys. Heater current value. Now that should be changing for a start. It's either a pulse width modulated signal, or it should have a rise in current when it first starts, etc. But we've got 0 amperage altogether. So the front oxygen sensor heater doesn't appear to be working. The current here, we've got 0 happening there. That's the heater. There's no current going to either of these heater circuits, which is interesting, I think. So if the heaters aren't heating up, then the oxygen sensors won't work full stop. I'm not sure if you can hear that little rough running at idle, but that's actually one of the conditions associated with those fault codes. I've just gone into the OBD2 side of things to try our readiness test, as you can see up the top there. As you can see, the check engine light is on, the $sign. See that oxygen sensor heating monitoring? So in actual fact, we should be seeing some sort of heater activity, but we're not. I might try that one first. Let's have a look at, we're still in open loop here, guys, but those heaters should definitely be operating. I realise that I'm just at idle, but at this point in time I just want to see those heater circuits. Oxygen sensor, 5 millivolts, 0 millivolts. We have got no activity there whatsoever, so I need to select that one, and we'll graph that one and just see what happens when I bring the revs up on that. Surely it should have kicked in by then, shouldn't it? We're seeing no operation whatsoever. This is our front sensor, as you can see up there, bank 1 sensor 1. Well, this is the one that measures the amount of oxygen that's in the exhaust, sends that information back to the ECU. Let's have a look at some freeze frame data and see what we've got there. We're still in open loop, and this is a concern to me. So the light on the dash came on straight away, even though it was in open loop. It was able to do a test on the heater circuit in the oxygen sensor and prove that it was faulty. Bank 1, sensor 2, we should see about 0 volts here, and this one here we should see a up and down movement of roughly between 0.2 of a volt and 0.8 of a volt. So I'll bring the revs up and let's see what happens. That was about 2,500 RPM, so that was within the range that it's meant to be. You can see we're seeing nothing happening here whatsoever. She's dead as a pork chop. So what sort of signal should we see? Well, here's an example of what we should see if we were on an oscilloscope. The front sensor, we should see a range that goes up and down like this, changing constantly, and the back O2 sensor, which tells us if the catalytic converter is working okay, should be roughly about 0 volts. We're getting no activity at the front. The back one can't work unless the front one works correctly. So replacing the back one won't sort out the issue because the front one's not sorted. Let's have a look at that heater circuit. Alright, you guys should be able to see that rear O2 sensor just down in there. You can see that there, and that comes up to a convenient connector, which is up the top here. I'm not sure if you can see it there. That white one down in there. And the front one is that fella there. So they're going to be easy to back probe and pull apart and just determine if things are operating or not. So let's check this front one. That's the important one for now, in my opinion, because without this front one working, the back one won't work. Oh dear. Oh, it's cracking me up. Okay, so what's one of the things I always say about checking things first? A good visual, isn't it? And of course, having a look and making sure that things are connected properly is super important. Wiggle test, another important thing. So I've reached down here and look, seriously, I didn't even get a chance to just try and get my hand down there without blocking your view. which is virtually impossible because of my fat finger syndrome. Anyway, I'll have to do this. I reached down there and didn't even press the button, and look what happened. The damn thing just fell out. So it hasn't even been pushed in properly. That's like super funny, hey? Look, while it's out, let's do some tests, shall we? Let's make sure that our heater circuit is operating properly, and of course that our oxygen sensor, when connected, should operate properly. So how do we check a heater circuit? On an oxygen sensor, you'll find two wires that are the same colour. In this particular case, there's two black ones there. So that's the heater circuit. The other ones, one will be an earth and one will be, possibly the earth is a white one. The blue one will most likely be the sensor wire. What I'm interested in for now is those two black wires. How do we check the circuit? Well, it's as simple as checking continuity, but we're probably looking at about 8 ohms. Let's have a look and see what we find. We come down here, I've just chucked in some pins, and before you stress out, it's not spreading the terminals whatsoever. They're just dressmaking pins. Of course, like I said, it should be roughly 8 ohms, something along those lines. Let's have a look at what we got. 1.7, 1.6. Seems fairly low to me. I might have to do some more research and find out exactly what they should be. Right, so I figured, well, we've already got another oxygen sensor on this thing. Let's check the heater circuit in that and see what the resistance for that one is. So the bottom one, the post one, I have just hooked up my multimeter as per normal. Let's have a look at what that says. And you can see that that's saying 4 ohms. What I'll do is I'll reconnect it anyway. It can't hurt just to connect it properly and do some more checks and see if the fault code disappears. Hopefully that'll kick in our back one as well. But yeah, let's just start with a bad connection and work from there. So what we've done so far is check that the heater circuit has continuity, so that we know that the heater element hasn't broken at all or anything like that. But how do we check and see that the ECU is actually powering that up? It should have a power and it should have an earth. Now what we can do is substitute those values by using, do not, they always say, use a incandescent test light. The O2 sensor heater should in fact have, like I said before, roughly around about the 8 ohm resistance. Now let's see what this fella here measures. Now I realise it's going to change with, so I've connected it up either end, and you can see I've got about 7.5 there, so that's quite within acceptable tolerance. So what I'm going to do is put this across where the heater element normally goes, and if the ECU brings it on, our little light should come on. So in theory, when either I turn on the ignition or I might have to crank it or start it to get the heater circuit to kick in, but that test light should glow when I do so. Ignition going to on, nothing happening, and there we go. And you may have noticed that it was actually pulsing. These later ones tend to use a pulse width modulated signal, which in turn will be changed according to the amount of voltage and current they want put through it. As you can see, that's proven that our heater circuit is working and that the ECU is supplying both power and ground to that particular circuit. So what I'm going to do now is check that earth and make sure it's okay. It's a little bit difficult to check it with an ohm meter because you're going through all the circuitry in the ECU, but a quick way you can do it is make sure that you put it on the positive side of the battery. Make sure that we have a good earth there. Can you see that? That's on. All right, and now we just check. Here's my terminal here, and we know that the top two were the heater circuit, so we need to go to the bottom two, and you can see that it's got a good earth there. Okay, test light's coming on, so that shows that we have circuit integrity to our earth there. Let's have a look at some live data first before we get all cocky. Okay, so I've gone into the OBD2 section just to graph it properly, and I've got short-term, long-term fuel trims, oxygen sensor bank 1, sensor 2, sorry, and oxygen sensor bank 1, sensor 1. So this fella here is the one that does our air-fuel ratio, that dictates whether it's going rich or lean, or how much oxygen is in the exhaust, sorry. And this one here shows us our catalyst in our catalytic converter. This should be reading 0. This should be fluctuating as it is right now. Long-term fuel trim, ideally it should be around about 0. Short-term fuel trim should be fluctuating, depends on if we accelerate And we should see a change here. They're pretty slow, just keep that in mind. There we go, you can see it. It's a bit of a flat spot there. Look, this is not ideal. It just gives us a little bit of an idea. You can see that flat spot there corresponds to our short-term fuel trim over here, and that is indicating that we have floored the hell out of it. Now, if we were to create a vacuum leak, we would end up with the opposite end of the scale, of course. But we can see it's changing, -8, negative, then positive 24. It's changing a hell of a lot. Look, we haven't sorted out all the issues in this. So I'm back after the road test, dollar signs back on the dash, and what I'm noticing here is that we have no current on our rear O2 sensor there. You can see that. Our front O2 sensor is working, but I'm still not happy with its output. Seems to be miles too high. Obviously you can see your front heater there is working okay, but the rear heater is not working at all. You can see the air fuel ratio correction there. It's going from what's that, -29 through to -7, and I've seen some positive activity in there as well, so it's just all over the shop. So guys, it's a new day. The Subaru's back again to have another shot at it, see if I can nut out what's going on. In the meantime, I've had some more information given to me by the customer. He bought this oxygen sensor off of eBay. Now, don't get me wrong, eBay is great if you want to buy, let's say, a fidget spinner, but when it comes to really fussy components, as in these Subarus, it's easy to get it wrong. Have a look at up the top of the screen there, see what it says. It says oxygen sensor for a Subaru rear post-cat Forester EJ 2.5 litre non-turbo 2002 to 2005. Now his is a 2003, that's in that category. So that's the correct oxygen sensor, isn't it? Or is it? If you scroll down the page here, and these guys have covered their butts, so it says to confirm this part fits your vehicle, please choose yada yada yada, but it says that it should fit this vehicle up the top. So 2003 Subaru Forester, that's exactly what we've looked at. Boom, hang on a sec, this part is not compatible. So this guy has installed the incorrect oxygen sensor, believing that it was the correct one according to this site here. I've been in contact with other members of TAT, the automotive technician. They have stated that they only ever fit genuine sensors to Subarus. One guy said that he actually gets the part number off the oxygen sensor, rings the dealer, and then they compare the actual part number on the oxygen sensor itself. It's a real problem apparently. Well, why don't I just get a genuine one? I'll put it this way, if I include a genuine sensor in the price of this invoice, I think I'll have to throw in a defibrillator as well, however you pronounce that, just for the heart attack that this customer is going to receive. Over $500 retail. So no wonder he wanted to get it off of eBay. I think I might be able to work around it. I've asked the customer to bring in the oxygen sensor that he replaced. Hopefully the wiring on that will give us a clue about what to do next. One of the main problems I'm experiencing is that I have several wiring diagrams and they all appear to be different. This one here I actually purchased and it's meant to be a genuine manual, and as you can see I've been out there with the highlighters. Maxie does love a good highlighter. But obviously the shielded wire, the white wire, is the sensor return. So I've done that blue. It's obvious that this one here is an earth. It goes off to an earth joint connector over there, sensor ground. We can see that, so that should have earth at all times. Now the heater circuit, well, there's 12 volts coming into both heater circuits here. So therefore the brown white must be the heater trigger wire, or the other end of the heater. I do wish that they had the component drawing there, but that's, hey, that's just life. Okay, so I've just confirmed it that it is definitely the wrong sensor. If we have a look up the top here, even though the wiring diagrams don't match up, I can make head and tail of it. So the yellow-red is the power wire. We've checked for power there already. The black-white wire here is the heater trigger wire or earth wire. So naturally you should have two white or two black on that end, shouldn't you? Sorry for my fat fingers. We don't have that, do we? Okay, so the two blacks are off to one side. So they're feeding these two here. And if we have a look on our old sensor, you can see the two whites at the top of the connector there. So there's our connector clip right there. And the two whites, part of the heater circuit, is, where are we there? Okay, so the two whites are up the top of the clip. So therefore, when we clip it in, the two whites should be at the top. And as you can see, that's where the grey and black wire are. So yeah, definitely wrong, definitely wrong, definitely wrong. Boom, boom. Just for the sake of the exercise, I've reconnected the old O2 sensor. I'm just going to let it dangle there. The reason being is because now I want to look at the scan tool and see if it says that if it has heater current. If it has heater current, obviously that means that all the ECU, etc. is working okay. Then I can worry about whether this sensor actually works or doesn't work. So now I'll connect up the G-Scan and just see if it's got current going through that circuit. That will tell me two things. I know that this O2 sensor here has the heater circuit complete and it appears all right, just for testing purposes only. And then that would also tell me that the ECU is working correctly and that it has a complete circuit and it's being triggered by internal drivers. Keep in mind this thing is a heater, so therefore what would happen? Well, it's going to get hot, isn't it? I've just turned the ignition on. I just used the old touchometer, guys, and man, it gets seriously hot and smoke started coming off of it. I thought it was pretty good just to see something so basic, such a simple way of testing it, to see smoke coming off of it, or heat coming off of it as a result of the current going through it. And of course that in turn proves that the system is complete, that it's working, so we have no problems with the heater circuit. As you can see there, it's saying 1.2 amps. Now whether that O2 is knackered or not, I don't know. All I wanted to find out was that ECU okay? And of course it must be okay because we have a completed circuit and the driver is actually putting power through this circuit. You can see obviously that there's smoke coming off the sensor there now. That indicates that of course it's getting hot. The ignition's been turned off for a little while now, but obviously it's just starting to cool down and react. Man, she pongs. Whew. I'm going to make this complex thing simple once again. All I'm going to do is front probe. Now it really doesn't matter if I'm wrong with the sensor wire or the earth wire. That won't matter because it'll just read negative. All I'm going to do now is, believe it or not, just heat up the oxygen sensor with the hot devil. There we go, 0.3, 0.4, guys. Did you see that? Look at that. Remember, the customer was complaining about it running rich. Well, check out this back oxygen sensor. This is the new eBay guy, but look at the soot on it, all the build up. So hopefully his CAT is okay, his catalytic converter. But I'll pop in the old sensor for now and see what happens. But yeah, obviously the ECU was making up its own mind through its embedded logic to try and decide what was the best thing for the vehicle at that particular time. Obviously it pushes it a bit rich, and yeah, very rich in this case, hey. Well, after all that testing, that's a little bit disappointing. Check out the old sensor that the customer pulled out to replace with the new one. Look at the thread, she's knackered, mate. It's no use even attempting to put that back in. In fact, there's probably damage to the thread. What I might have to do now is just change over the wiring. I was hoping not to do that. I was hoping to put the old one in. But look, that thread's absolutely knackered. There's nothing I can do about that. Now that I have both O2 sensors out, you can quite clearly see that the wiring does not match. This one has the heater circuit, those two white wires. They're up the top of the connector where the plug plugs in. This one here, the heater, has on the bottom. So yeah, epic fail there, guys. I need to do some switching around. So that wasn't hard to do. You just lift up these little plastic connectors. I've just got little picks that I use in electronics as well, so they come in handy to try and remove these things. So it just pops straight out the back, and then of course you should hear an audible click when it goes into place. So as you can see, they're both identical now. Two whites at the top, grey to the bottom right, black to the bottom left. Okay, so all I need to do is of course clean up that thread in the exhaust before I attempt to put the eBay special in there. I'm not happy doing this, guys, I'll let you know straight up. Not happy at all, but customers not willing to spend 500 bucks a piece on oxygen sensors. So I understand that. We'll give it a try. Fingers crossed it should have no diagnostic trouble codes. And we've got no codes. That's a good start, hey? Alright, so let's just escape out of that. Let's go to our data. We'll now have a look at our data and see what that's doing. Let's fire it up and see what it does. And there we go. 10 amps, 9 amps. Let's graph some of those. Current is going 6. It'll come down, of course, as it heats up. And the rear O2 current value, we have current. Excellent. It's good to know, isn't it? Our lambda, which would be the front one, that's got a value of 1 at the moment. So that's working correctly. Up the back one's working. It's seeing a lean. Should drop off, goes to lean, so that back one's working correctly. I've just gone into OBD2, and you can clearly see that it's in open loop. Doesn't matter what I do, it stays in open loop, and of course that affects everything else. We have a look at long term and short term. 21% on long term. Man, that's insane. It's just getting richer and richer and richer. So the stupid thing's still in open loop, that's why. Open loop still. So we've still got issues here, guys. It's not right. Although we're still getting this hunting here, which I'm not overly happy with. 35% to -17, not good at all. Have a look at the oxygen sensor there. It's got hiccups in it everywhere. I still believe that front oxygen sensor needs to be gotten rid of. I don't like it. You can hear it hunting up and down too. So the back one's working perfectly now, not a problem. The front one wiring is correct, but internally I just don't reckon it's any good. I'm just going to recommend to the customer that they need another front oxygen sensor and suggest genuine. Of course, this back one we've been lucky with. It appears to be working fine, but that front one's just, doesn't want to play. So what have we got here? We've got an oxygen sensor bank 2 that's just responding to the front one. The front one, like I said before, I'm sure it's the wrong one or it's knackered. Check it out. It's going from up to a high, so it's 0.6 up to 5 volts. 5 volts for crying out loud. No wonder the thing's all over the shop. 31 positive in fuel trim, -12 in fuel trim. This is just bizarre, absolutely bizarre, guys. That's the reason this thing is hunting its brains out. You can't blame the rear oxygen sensor for doing what it's doing. Now that it's connected properly, of course, this front one is wrong. Okay, needs to be replaced, simple as that. Subaru, take 2. I'm getting some more information from the customer with regard to this Subaru and the work that's been done on it so far. It turns out that there was a mechanic that fitted the first oxygen sensor on the front. Now what he's done is he's fitted an oxygen sensor rather than an air fuel sensor. They are different. One is a narrow band, one is a wide band. Now, I've done a lot more research. I never realised that you could have a 4-wire wideband oxygen sensor. An article that I've been looking at is to do with wideband oxygen sensors, particularly the 4-wire ones. So now I've got it clear on my head, the testing procedures that needs to be done. And it's reinforced to me that the original mechanic fitted an oxygen sensor rather than an air-fuel ratio sensor. They're totally different, and that's why we're getting all these messed up readings that is actually screwing with the ECU. I've advised the customer that they really need to go genuine in this particular case, and they've found some genuine items online. That's what I've been told anyway, complete with a nice box, etc. Hopefully it's correct. It's listed as an air fuel ratio sensor, so hopefully that's the correct one. It also turns out with these particular sensors that you can't test them with either a multimeter or even an oscilloscope. You need to do it with a scan tool, and that's why we're getting these unusual readings that don't seem to make sense. Things that I need to focus on today are my oxygen sensor 1, my oxygen sensor 2, pre and post CAT, plus my lambda. That's an important thing. That will give us the data that we need. This has been quite a difficult diagnosis and repair in more ways than one. The old Subaru decided to fight back. Check it out. Bit of a disagreement between myself and the Subi exhaust system. You know, one of the benefits of being a member of TAT, the Automotive Technician, is that you can get years and years of experience at your fingertips. A wealth of information that can be passed on to you to help you to diagnose things. I've been assisted by so many guys to come up with the right diagnosis, and it's been really appreciated. The Subaru is totally a different system to what we used to. They have what's called a floating ground. So in other words, instead of it being 0 volts as you would expect for ground, these raise the ground at 1.5 volts to stop any noise and fluctuation down below. This is done internally at the ECU. And then of course they have a bias voltage up the top, or they raise that voltage to 2.5. So here's the old one that I've just pulled out. Look how sooty it is, which obviously indicates that it's been running super rich. I'm hoping that this is going to sort out our issue, get this old Subaru up and running. So when I put this new oxygen sensor in, I'll be doing some further testing to try and get my head around how this system works, and also to try and help you guys if you come across this in the future. So let's stick it in. Of course, before I do anything, I want to make sure that I have the correct one and then the wiring is in the right spot. So let's have a look at this one here. We have the blue and white at the top where the clip is, and the two blacks at the bottom, which is your heater circuit, of course. So that looks pretty spot on to me, guys. So fingers crossed, we'll put it in. That should sort out our issue. While I've got the oxygen sensor out of the catalytic converter, I thought I'd use my cheap, nasty Audi work zone inspection camera, which I paid about, I don't know, 69 bucks. Actually works really, really well. And I'll show you a couple of pictures of what it looks like inside there, to give you an idea of what the catalytic converter looks like. Is it in good condition or not physically? So I'm not sure how much you can see of this, but if we cruise around there, I can adjust the light source to make it better. But you can see there's it appears to be clear in the middle, but around the edges, whoops, hang on, around the edges it appears to be quite blocked. You can see it's just a tiny little maze of little passages that the gases go through when they go against the precious metals. But you can see there's quite a bit of blockage around the edges, isn't there? So I've just brought up a few details there. I've got short-term trim, oxygen sensor voltage, bank 1, sensor 2, and of course sensor 1, and short-term fuel trim, bank 1, sensor 2. Not sure if I need that or not. We'll wait and see what happens. But I reckon this front oxygen sensor has a bias voltage on it. See, it's 2.15, and I've just got the ignition turned on. There's no reason that it should have voltage attached to it without oxygen going across it. But if it has a bias voltage, that would explain it. Let's start it up and see what she does. Bring the revs up a little bit. Okay, you can see the short term's just kicked in. Obviously it's gone into closed loop and it's starting to pull fuel away. Before I filmed this a little bit and it was minus 30 when it first started up. So that was clearly an issue with it. But the back voltage looks good. It's well, it should be pretty close to 0. So that's not quite right at the moment, but we'll just let it run for a while. It may sort itself out. I guess one of the most important things to do is look at fuel trims, which we can see that they're acceptable. Let's just accelerate. Should go up, and then it should come down. So it went up, there we go, and should come down as I decel. Alright, so short-term fuel trim should be changing. There we go. It's just very slow to read, guys. That's why we're not seeing the figures that we need. But you can see on decel, it's starting to pull away fuel there, which is good. That front oxygen sensor must be working off a bias. It's a little unusual that it's going like that still. But it's certainly not the 5 volts that it had before, and it's not hunting like it was before either. But as you can see in the top right corner, we don't have the dollar sign on the dash anymore. The codes are cleared, which just shortly before I replaced that oxygen sensor, the check engine light was on. Remember I said before that this may have a bias voltage attached to the ECU, which means the ECU sends out a specific voltage to the signal wire, just to prove the integrity of the wire. How you test for that is you disconnect your oxygen sensor, you go on your signal wire, and we're looking for a voltage. What we're seeing now is 2.1 volts, which is consistent with the reading that we're seeing on the O2 sensor. I'll just check the sensor earth integrity to make sure that that's okay too. Well, that is interesting. We've got 1.8 volts on our sensor earth. According to our wiring diagram here, I've highlighted the rear O2 sensor. That's the one that I was concerned about before, and that has its own earth going off to a sensor ground. It's a splice join there. Whereas the front one itself, it'll be the two shielded wires here, and that in turn has an earth that goes into the ECU. I'm just going to use the little launch C reader just to see what's happening and see what sort of data we can get off of it. My lambda, which should be 1, appears to be close to 1, doesn't it? Closed loop, we're in closed loop, which is excellent. That happened very, very quick, didn't it? Which is good. Short term is, 5 positive, 6 positive, 7 positive. Coming down a bit, that's good. Our O2 sensor, our second one, should be roughly 0, as I mentioned. The lambda should be about 1. This one here, as I said, should be around about the 2.1, but it should vary, I believe. There we go, look at that varying. Sweet. Okay, so what we want to do now is put on the G-scan. Just been on a decent road test. Some more information that I've gathered is that the lambda appears to be on 1, which is perfect. So that seems to indicate that everything is working how it's meant to, even though I'm getting some weird readings. The lambda is the actual important one. So when I accelerate, it should richen up. When I decel, it goes from rich to lean. As you can see over the other side there, it's gone from 0.8 up to 1.4. So that's going from rich to lean, which is fine. Our heater circuits are perfect, there's no issue with those there. We've got current going through those nicely, so that's all good. No check engine light on the dash. Now these sensor 1, or the air-fuel ratio sensor, is different in testing methods compared to what we're used to. This one here, as you can see, it's already got 2.1 volts going to it. Now that 2.1 volts goes from the ECU down to the sensor, and then that should return depending on the potential difference between the two cells in a wideband sensor. We can test this sensor here by accelerating hard. Unlike the narrowband sensor where we accelerate hard and we expect it to go rich, which would mean up, this fella goes down. And when we back it off, it should go up, not down as we normally expect. It's now in closed loop. Let's just do another goose test and see what happens. Rich, we went rich, then we went lean. Now have a look at the O2 there. Excellent. Perfect. Good. All right. So we're now seeing a response on our bank, or our sensor 2, which is excellent. And then when we leaned off, and that should come back up to where it belongs. We don't have that hunting and surging that we had before. It's nice and even, which is good. But we're still hovering around this 2.1 volt range, which obviously is where this runs. So this puts in 2.1 volts to the oxygen sensor, the wideband oxygen sensor. Then it looks for a variation between the two cells, and then it pumps current into that sensor to try and bring it back up to the 2.1. And then that will dictate how rich or lean the engine is actually running. Well, hasn't that been a bit of a ride, both figuratively and literally? We've had people looking at it before, putting wrong parts in left, right and centre. Firstly, the mechanic putting in the incorrect sensor in the front, putting in an oxygen sensor instead of an air-fuel ratio sensor. And then the back one being put in incorrect part, wrong wires, round the wrong way. Took a little while to sort out, guys, but got there in the end. I still strongly believe that that catalytic converter is had it and it needs replacement. She's for schnookered, mate. So I'll recommend to the customer that they replace that. I mean, they haven't had this vehicle very long at all. It's only a matter of, I guess, a couple of months. I don't think a service has been done on it. I don't think a tune has been done on it. It's done like 250-something thousand clicks. So the motor really needs a bit of attention as well, with some maintenance. and that should help it to run better. But I'm happy with the work that I have done that has sorted out those, or firstly the check engine light, the dollar sign on the dash is gone, and that's the most important thing at this particular point in time. Also, it's given me a bit of insight into a 4-wire wideband oxygen sensor. I didn't know they existed before. I thought they only had the 5 and the 6 etc. wire wideband oxygen sensor, but it's helped me to do some extra research as well to see how they work and to have that consistent voltage only under hard acceleration and deceleration should we see a difference, of course, not like our normal oxygen sensor which should go up and down on a regular basis. So it's been a learning curve for me as well. The articles that I have referred to I'll put down in the description below, namely these two fellas here. I've had to study them pretty well to get it into my head, the testing procedures to do. So guys, I hope you got something from this video. I've learnt something as usual, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe, hit that big button down there, give it a like, and feel free to comment down below. Don't forget about that notification bell, give it a big dong so you don't miss out on any future videos. So until next time guys, this is MiracleMAX signing off. I'll catch you later.